Welcome back, beautiful tri-state area. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. I'm your host, Zen Sams. Up in just a few minutes, we have the Scandal segment brought to you by Your Home TV and their channel partners. And today we're featuring Imran Ansari of Aidala Bertuna Kamins, otherwise known as ABK Law, right here in New York City. He's also a regular contributor and legal analyst on law and crime. Today, we explore a chilling trend that has sparked debate across the nation: the rise of highly educated, Ivy League educated white men in their 20s who allegedly commit heinous crimes. Two cases stand out in particular: Luigi Mangione and Bryan Kohberger. Luigi Mangione, a 26-year-old graduate of the University of Pennsylvania, has been charged in connection with the killing of United Healthcare CEO Bryan Thompson. Allegations point to meticulous planning, including the use of a ghost gun, and anti-corporate ideologies discovered in a manifesto upon his arrest. Bryan Kohberger, a 29-year-old criminology PhD student, stands trial for the 2022 brutal slayings of 4 University of Idaho students. Evidence linking him to the crime scene has raised unsettling questions about the paradox of a man studying criminal justice while allegedly committing such an act. Both cases reveal unsettling similarities: high education, privilege, and meticulous methods that baffle law enforcement and the public alike. To help us break this down, we're joined by Imran Ansari. Welcome to the show, superstar.
Thanks for having me, Zen.
Okay, so the paradox here is hard to ignore, Imran. We have two individuals, Mangione and Kohberger, who come from privileged academic backgrounds. I mean, this isn't your typical criminal profile, yet their alleged crimes are heinous, calculated, and seemingly defy logic. And studies suggest that traits such as narcissism, suppressed aggression, or even a desire for notoriety can drive individuals like these. So what psychological factors might drive highly educated individuals like Mangione and Kohberger to commit such violent acts seemingly at odds with their backgrounds?
Sure. And Zen, of course, these individuals, both Mangione and Bryan Kohberger, are innocent until proven guilty. So they enjoy that presumption of innocence right now until they are tried and found guilty by a jury of their peers. But two factors or more. There could be a desire to have that fame, like you said, Zen. There's a trait that is common in serial killers, those who are killing for fame, that they enjoy to see their names in the papers. They get some sort of satisfaction from that, and that could be some sort of factor we have here. Of course, Bryan Kohberger was studying criminology in a PhD, so he was infused with criminology and crime and forensics. And then, of course, he's alleged to have committed this multi murder on the campus of that university. Then you have someone like Mangione. This guy seemingly had everything. You see, which is sort of somewhat morbid and disturbing, but this public attraction to him. He's a good-looking guy. He's a young guy. He comes from a family of wealth and seeming political influence and social influence. Yet here he is alleged to have committed this crime and done so in a premeditated state where it was meticulously planned. Of course, he was caught and is alleged to now have committed the crime. But that could be also some desire for fame or notoriety like that. There's also a possibility that both these individuals may have been suffering from mental health illnesses. And that's something what does not discriminate against socioeconomic lines, whether someone is educated or highly educated versus someone who may be from poverty and have gone on to commit crimes. If it's mental health based, then that's something that doesn't discriminate. And it's a factor that has to be considered actually in both these alleged crimes where these individuals are alleged to have committed them.
Well, Mangione's mother was interviewed and she released a statement to somebody in the authorities saying, "I could see my son doing something like this." I mean, that's a pretty powerful statement from a mother, right? So it's interesting that you bring up mental health, because if you go back to why she would have felt like that, perhaps there was a decline in his mental health or behavior leading up to this alleged crime, right? That the mother was able to even point out. So mental health could be a huge play here. And your perspective is so fascinating, the one that alludes to wanting fame and notoriety, right? I mean, it's really it's it's very sobering to realize that psychological traits like suppressed aggression can exist even among the most outwardly successful individuals, and it certainly challenges, like what you said, that societal assumption, right? So let's talk about the role of education, right? Traditionally, education is viewed as a deterrent to crime. Yet in these cases, we see how their intelligence and academic backgrounds may have even empowered their alleged actions. I mean, Kohberger's studies in criminology, for example, may have given him insight into avoiding detection, and Mangione's like technical skills pretty much enabled the construction of a ghost gun meticulously planned. So how might their advanced education influence their methods and motivation in committing these crimes? This is what you see every day, Imran.
Sure. So starting with Mangione, I mean, we already have evidence that he was um, studying certain ideologies, and he was critical of, say, capitalism in some ways, or big pharma, and he was doing some research on his own in terms of some of these ideologies and being outspoken about that. And you've seen him when he was being brought into the prison after he was apprehended. He was very combative with the media, and he was sort of spewing what seems to be ideological, ranting and utterances. And of course, if we are looking at the evidence in this case, there was deny, defend, depose etched into the shell casings of these bullets, which shows a very a study, because there was the book which was criticizing big pharma and healthcare in this country, and that was etched on the shells. So you're seeing a motive based not on necessarily just mindless violence, um, although this is a tragedy and this is clearly a violent killing, but it's based on an ideology or a belief system that is now almost like an intellectual killer. It is someone who is targeting another based on that teachings or understandings that they have got through reading, through study, and it has now manifested itself not in just, say, extreme or voicing out against healthcare or big pharma or the industry here in this country or capitalism or what have you, but it actually manifested itself in a violent act. And of course, he's alleged to have committed that violent act, and he has that pedigree, which doesn't necessarily fit the public's image or stereotype of a cold-blooded killer. And when you look to someone like Bryan Kohberger, it's somewhat of a similar thing. This guy was studying to get his PhD in criminology. And with Bryan Kohberger, did the study of criminology that was a line crossed where the study of it perhaps became a fascination with it, and had led him to allegedly committed this multi murder, homicide on the campus of that university. And could the teachings or the study inform some of the actions that he took after that killing that he's alleged to have committed? So it's fascinating where you see these two individuals. And I think that's why the public is so focused on these cases.
All right, let's chat societal pressures. There's no denying the pressures that individuals from privileged, high achieving backgrounds face. Expectations from family, society, and even peers can sometimes lead to disillusionment or even breakdowns. The question arises, when does that pressure become too much, leading to radical or violent outcomes? Imran, could societal pressures and the burden of expectations contribute to the radicalization of criminal behaviors of such individuals?
When we talk about societal pressures, we could take the word societal and look at the term social media. And I raise this because there's such an access to information out there now for, let's say, a young mind such as Mangione or Kohberger. Um, and not only is there the information that's available to them, but a lot of misinformation. And I think we've seen that sort of trend where, whether it be in politics, where people are sometimes latching on to some views that, or fake news or misinformation that's out there that is later debunked, but it starts sort of a frenzy of thought and communications out there about something, and may lead someone to violence. Who knows, right? And then uh, you have that situation potentially here where they're accessing information, they're seeing, the ability to maybe get notoriety very quickly now that there's social media and there's so much information at our fingertips. And it could be leading the societal pressures, could be stemming from things like that. The need for attention. Maybe they've been rejected in life, or they have everything at their fingertips and with that silver spoon, so to say. And in a weird way, it's manifesting itself in their minds to reject that and maybe go to the total opposite extreme and reject some of that societal norm that they've been accustomed to in their lives. So it could be the pressure, it could be social media, it could be access to disinformation or misinformation, that all comes together maybe in the crucible of a mental health issue, and it manifests itself with these sort of conditions that leads to a violent crime like we see here. So there's a lot of pressure on youth, let's say in the age range of both these young men, that could have manifested itself in the most extreme form here, what we're seeing now.
Let's pivot to legal implications. We know that the legal system aims for impartiality, but the reality is often more complex. Studies have shown that socioeconomic status, education, and even race can sometimes influence sentencing and legal outcomes. In cases like Mangione and Kohberger, where privilege and education are at play, the public often wonders, will they be treated differently under the law? Do defendants like Mangione and Kohberger receive different legal considerations, Imran, due to their educational backgrounds and societal status?
So they shouldn't. And if it's established through the evidence that either of these two individuals committed the crime at trial, when it comes down to sentencing, there's going to be mandatory minimums in many ways, especially if they are convicted of murder. And I don't expect that there would be any leniency in any form, even if there was some sort of discretion to do so, just because of their background or their education or their family life. Because these are pretty serious. These are the most serious crimes that we can see here of homicide. And it may be a factor more so, these considerations, during the course of the trial and when those attorneys are going to select that jury to make sure they get a fair and impartial jury, who's going to be looking past, say, what these individuals may have had, and that they've had everything at their fingertips. Why would they have commit this sort of alleged, or why is it alleged that they committed this crime? And that's going to be perhaps more of a consideration at that time, selecting a fair and impartial jury at trial versus sentencing, where I think that if they are convicted, they're probably going to get the maximum.
And finally, let's chat preventative measures, if any. Preventing cases like these requires understanding the warning signs early. Educational institutions often have a front row seat to students' mental and emotional health, but may not always know how to intervene. So, creating environments that encourage students to seek help is critical. What steps can educational institutions take to identify and support students who may be at risk of engaging in violent behavior despite their academic successes, Imran?
Sure. If there's a good faith basis to believe that a student may be dealing with a mental illness that may manifest itself at some point in some sort of violent act, then certainly those educational institutions should do anything under their power and under the law and whatever parameters they have, to make sure that that individual gets the mental health treatment that they need, at least in the school setting, right? There's only so many things they could do outside of the school setting. But if there's a credible threat, there is the burden and the responsibility for that school to let law enforcement know that there is someone who is manifesting some desire to commit a violent crime. And they have to make sure that they get that information to those who are in the ability, or do have the ability and are in the position to possibly prevent a crime from happening. Of course, there's no such thing as preventive detention in certain ways, but if there is someone who is becoming violent and there is enough for law enforcement or even civil commitment in terms of a mental health institution, for action to be taken under the law, then certainly the red flags need to be paid attention to, and these educational institutions need to make sure that they report it to the proper authorities.
Yeah, and I can imagine things like book clubs can often be a clear indication. Apparently, Luigi Mangione had a book club and was urging some of the members to read the Unabomber's manifesto, and they were reading it together. So that could have been a red flag right there, and especially if this was done on some level of school grounds, right? And then we have Bryan Kohberger. He was studying with some of the most sophisticated professors who covered serial killers, and he was exposed to this on a daily level. Some of the students that took Kohberger's class said that he was a very harsh, he would never give an easy mark, right? He was always very harsh. And then the weeks leading after the alleged quadruple murder, he was giving hundreds to everyone, which is very interesting to me, right? And I know that you're very enthralled and intertwined in this case because of the documentary you were doing, but it's interesting to me, right? So those are some little subtle, yet could it be something more? I don't know, right? It's more conversation is needed surrounding that.
Absolutely. And you pointed out, yes, Bryan Kohberger in those weeks leading up to the crime was having issues. He got terminated as I believe, a teacher assistant because some of the issues, and he had confronted a female student in a very harsh manner, and there were some problems going on in the educational setting that was leading to at least him being terminated, which seems to be a pretty serious consequence for his actions when he is a PhD student. So those are all, red flags and warnings that need to be paid attention to. And if there's any way to stop someone from committing a crime, people have to be vigilant in terms of doing that.
Yeah. Well, we are out of time, Imran. Thank you so much for joining us today and providing such thoughtful insights. These cases remind us of the complexities behind violent crimes and the importance of examining both the psychological and societal factors at play. So thank you so much for breaking that down.
Thanks for having me, Zen.
To our listeners, that was Imran Ansari of Aidala Bertuna Kamins, otherwise known as ABK Law, right here in the city. He's also a regular contributor and legal analyst on law and crime. And this was the Scandal segment brought to you by Your Home TV and their channel partners. Make sure you follow Imran on the gram at Imran Ansari ESQ. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. We'll be right back after this.